When you talk about culture, it's so nebulous. You know what it feels like because you're in it, but it's very hard to articulate to other people what it means. And I think one of the biggest upsides for me about being clearer on what our purpose and values and our vision was, it gave us something much more tangible to communicate to external stakeholders. And I love that part of it.
I think almost without exception, as the number one reason for joining us was the culture and how we articulated and expressed it, and what they saw behind those words as being, truly implementing it.
Hi, I'm Belden Menkus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guests today are Mike Scott and James Beatton, both from Cripps, the top 100 law firm. Cripps has over 500 lawyers and business professionals and is a certified B Corporation. The firm describes itself as lawyers for business and life. Mike is senior partner and chair of the board, and James is the managing partner of the firm. I interviewed Mike in November 2022 when he described the inclusive process that Cripps went through to arrive at its purpose and values. Growth strategy was also on his mind then. A little over 2 years later, it seems like a good time to get an update, not least to talk about Cripps winning Independent Law Firm of the Year at the Lawyer Awards 2024. Very glad to have you back, Mike, and James, for you to join us. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist podcast, and congratulations on that win. Really great to have you. In our previous conversation, we talked about the process you went through to kind of get to, let's say, discover, remember your purpose and values, and then the 4 strategic pillars. I just wondered if you could give us a quick recap on that, because I think it would be important to the rest of the conversation.
Okay, shall I kick off with that then? It's still very much at the heart of our business, as you would expect. But as you'll recall, we went through quite a long process of about 12 to 18 months where we went out, consulted with the business, which was a hugely important thing to do before we distilled everything down to our succinct purpose statement, if you like, which is to be the difference and to make a positive, lasting impact on the lives and businesses of others. So that's our people, our clients, our planet, and our community. And those are the 4 pillars: our people, clients, planet, and community. So that's where we anchor quite a few of our objectives and actions for the year with KPIs attached.
And what about values?
Values was something that was already quite well embedded into the business. So that
really, interesting.
Yeah. So that was a process of almost reaffirming the values that we'd already embedded across the business. But those are care, imagine, achieve, and enjoy. And there's an expanded version of that, if you like, where we, in a more detailed way, we articulate exactly what that means to all of us and what we try and aspire to be on a day-to-day basis.
Mike, I've got to give you credit as a firm and maybe as an individual for not trying to torture those words into something that spells anything else.
Well, I do. So that took a lot of restraint, didn't it?
Well, you do like an acronym, Mike, don't you? But we've resisted the temptation there.
And to what extent would you say your purpose was a factor in winning this Independent Law Firm Award?
I think it was hugely important, but I'm going to hand over to James on that one.
It was definitely central and very relevant in the submission. I suppose the platform from which we were able to highlight a number of achievements in that particular year. So having established our purpose and our vision, we then, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I suspect, we then moved towards B Corp certification. We were already driving growth. So the way in which we had demonstrated that was with the merger with PDT solicitors last year. And a key part of it was our people strategy. So when I started, at the same time, we recruited a director of people, and how we drove a more focused, coherent people strategy around what it really meant for our people to be within this business and how they could contribute not just to its financial success, but also to tie them into very coherently into our purpose and what we were trying to do. So those things were central to the application. So yeah, it was the bedrock.
Yeah. And anything in particular that you might point to as a highlight of that people strategy that really brought the purpose alive?
We changed a lot, whether it be around the reward or recognition, our competency framework, which we introduced called Career Developer.
Mm-hmm.
So it built building blocks so that how people work in our business and what we were asking from them was much, much clearer.
So really a kind of comprehensive rethink.
Yeah. We've always had a strong people culture. Many years ago, I Googled Cripps, and I think it came up on Roll on Friday as the top 5 nice firms to work with, which I do take as a compliment. But in loose terms, we've always had a strong people culture. What we had not done until the exercise that Mike talked about was really attempt to articulate what that meant. So we were finally putting words around what it meant to be a part of Cripps. And I found that a very powerful thing to do because, I don't know, when you talk about culture, it's so nebulous. You know what it feels like because you're in it, but it's very hard to articulate to other people what it means. And I think one of the biggest upsides for me about being clearer on what our purpose and values and our vision was, it gave us something much more tangible to communicate to external stakeholders. And I love that part of it.
And particularly for people who are looking to join us, whether it was PDT or whether it was some, we've had quite a few new joiners this year. They cited, I think almost without exception, as the number one reason for joining us was the culture and how we articulated and expressed it and what they saw behind those words as being, truly implemented.
I'd be interested to hear a little bit about the merger, because I know for any organization, but I think particularly for law firms, it's a very attractive thing to do, but also a difficult thing to pull it off both before and after the deal. So interested to hear sort of about that journey.
Now, there's a story, I suppose. So we've done 3 mergers in 10 years. In relative terms, Cripps has always been the larger merger partner. And each time we had a lessons learned exercise. After the third one, the lessons learned are longer than the previous 2 times. So even when you think you know what you need to be doing, to really make it work, it is really hard work. With PDT, it always felt right from the start that there was a strong cultural synergy. So they used different words to describe who they were, but the words were very similar. We were able to quickly establish that culturally it would be relatively straightforward to match. The practical challenge of delivering a deal and then integrating it is huge. And the hearts and minds piece is key. And that's where an awful lot of effort obviously went into. But we still learnt a lot. Bringing 55 people onto an entirely new set of systems and an entirely new set of processes on day one is a hugely challenging exercise for them. So there was a large amount of excitement, and there still is, about what we've done and what we can achieve together. But those first few months are very hard because you're asking a lot of a group of people who are very up for it, but everything is different, and that's quite unsettling. But we're 1 year in, and using the 1 year anniversary as an opportunity to celebrate what we've achieved, but just be really clear that going forward, we're doing what we said we would do, which was build on the success that business had in Horsham. So recruiting new people, winning new clients, and cross-selling the services that come out of Tunbridge Wells and London, so that we have a more obviously full service offering across all 3 offices. But at its core, they were, when we did the deal, great people with huge energy, entrepreneurial spirit, and that is still the case. And I think learning from them, now that they're more established in our business, is then also a really important part of the exercise.
I guess that touches a little bit on a theme I'd like to dig into more broadly, which is, how do you keep the purpose and the values fresh and relevant and alive? Whether that's, similar challenge to how do you communicate it to a new crowd of people joining you, but for the people who've been there, what do you do?
It's quite fortuitous that with B Corp you have a sort of requirement, and we probably do this anyway, to keep abreast of everything that you are doing in terms of continuous improvement. We've literally just come up to our 1-year anniversary as a B Corp business, so we're about to issue our first impact report. And what an impact report does is dig very deep across the business to make sure that you are keeping it fresh, you're continually improving, you are making it real for everybody on a day-to-day basis. Now, what we're finding, interestingly, is actually it's not that hard to keep the sort of values, the purpose, and particularly pillars and objectives around planet and community alive, because actually there's quite a lot of interest in actually engaging on those projects. And some might say that there's even too much interest sometimes, and that, hold on guys, we need to run a business here. We've got to make good money to be able to do some of the things that we want to do around our planet and community pillars. So that bit, engagement, hasn't been particularly a problem. Keeping it fresh isn't too much of a problem either, because there's always stuff that people want to be doing in order to further those objectives. I think what's been more challenging since you and I last spoke, and what I think probably we did see as being a challenge anyway, was getting the balance right. I just think if you are truly, well, certainly being a B Corp business, but if you're truly committed to the ESG agenda as well as financial performance and ambitious growth, then you are always trying to strike that balance on a daily, monthly, yearly basis. And sometimes you don't quite get it right. Sometimes, I think I referred last time to the graphic equalizer, trying to maintain the sound and ensuring that the bass or the treble doesn't crank up too high and distort it. And that's literally how I see it on an ongoing basis. And I think that's a brilliant challenge to have, because it means you're always on the road to continuous improvement, getting that right.
And one of the things I've seen come up in some of the conversations I've had is the model you're describing, the sort of balancing model, which I understand. And then the other one is the sort of, it all reinforces each other. We're happy to have more treble because that'll somehow bring up the bass. I just wonder, do you see sort of differences between those two ways of looking at it playing out in the firm? And is there a way to shift to get them more in the, we're not trying to make trade-offs here, we're more everything's reinforcing each other?
Sure. Yeah, I get the point you're making. And it's certainly not the case that we're, sitting on one of them to push it down. I think your point is, as long as purpose runs through everything, the balance ought to be, sort of just about right as it moves up and down.
Yeah.
You're right. That's what we're trying to achieve. And I suppose that goes to the heart of the debate that's out there between businesses as to whether purpose sits in a pot over here and profit sits in a pot over there. And never the twain shall meet. And you're always struggling with that. That is not what we are trying to do. It's not the way we articulate it, or certainly not the way I do. For me, purpose runs through delivering for clients and delivering on your bottom line as much as it does in the way that you go to the community, engage with the community, or help on climate change, for example. So I think it has to be driven through that way. Otherwise, you are dealing with different pots and they can be silos.
James, anything you might want to add to that view? Because you're sort of, feels to me like you're just a little bit more in the control room.
I think if we're honest, then as we started on this journey, there probably was a greater emphasis on how to dial up the community and planet elements. And I think we've done that really successfully. But very much now the focus is on our performance and our people and our clients. And I think a very clearly articulated shift this year has been financials and clients. And we've invested a lot in the last 18 months in BD, in getting more and better people to help us drive our BD efforts forward. We've got a much clearer focus around how we do that, and we're starting to see the benefits of that coming through. Yeah, I think it's natural, certainly when you start something like this, that you will focus perhaps more on some of the softer issues because it's really important. But having established that, I think you do need to keep that focus on performance. And that isn't in any way, shape or form to suggest that we will become a more city-focused business that is entirely driven by our revenue and our profitability. But it does mean that we need to constantly emphasize the importance of doing that so that we can continue to do the things that we've said we would do across all our pillars. So it is getting that balance right. But if we're not growing, if we're not increasing our profits, then our ability to continue to invest in our business across all areas will be impacted. So it's entirely consistent to have a financially driven organization that is purpose-led and designed to make sure that how we use our profits is not just to, if you like, line our partners' back pockets, which is really important. There is more to that, and I think most of our people do recognize that. I'm going to get shot for having said that.
No, I don't think you are. I think you're going to be applauded. I was with a client about a year ago, one of our biggest clients, in fact, and they were going through a similar exercise. And they said, well, how did you go through the process of sort of articulating your purpose? Surely it's obvious what your purpose is. You're a professional services firm. Your purpose is to serve us well and to the absolute best of your ability and to match our needs. They've got a point. So, recognizing that, we've created a clients and markets group internally that puts clients at the very heart and center of our thinking as much as our people are at the heart and center of our thinking. And that is important. That is as purposeful as all the work that we're doing around the community and planet.
Mm-hmm. So that comes directly into a question I'm really interested in. So if I were a client and you were absolutely forbidden to tell me the firm's purpose, how would I know what it is? What would I experience? How would it be different from any other good law firm?
It's all around the people, isn't it? So the be the difference mantra that obviously we're not allowed to tell the clients because you've just set the ground rules, will be experienced in the way that they see our people go the extra mile, see our people keep badgering them for instructions rather than waiting for those instructions to come through, giving them introductions to new networks that will help their business but won't help ours at all, particularly introducing events that are not self-serving. It's all the things that are generous in the way that we engage with clients that might make them stop and think, cracky, what's in it for them there? I don't understand that. Are they literally just doing it because they like us and they want us as a client to do really, really well? Well, yes. And that is what drives our service culture. So I think that's what a lot of our clients experience. Do we get it right all the time? No, but that is what we aim to do on a day-to-day basis. That's the client experience. And then they'll see, if they're interested, everything else that we do internally for our people. They may talk to our people, because sometimes they do, about what it's like to work in our business. And then they'll see, if they're interested, through the impact reports and other things that we do, what we do within the community and planet sphere as well. And some clients are more interested than others. Some aren't. We do have a number of very like-minded clients who want to work with us and have invited us onto their boards to talk about what it was like to become a B Corp, what that has meant. They've become one. And so we've got a little non-chargeable side hustle in giving clients help and guidance on what that's like to go through that process, but also articulating your purpose more clearly as well. So there are a number of benefits and a number of different experiences that clients would have around that, even if I wasn't allowed to articulate it.
I agree completely. You hope that by having gone through the exercise that we've gone through, that a client's experience of their interaction with Cripps, in every sense, should convey very clearly who we are, what we stand for, and what we're trying to achieve for them, but also for our people and our communities and our planet. That's what you hope. Is it a consistent experience every single time? Probably not, and it's probably unrealistic to think that it ever will be, particularly as some clients simply want different things out of a relationship, and there's huge satisfaction in clients that really want that deeper relationship where you can add greater value in the way that Mike described. But there are also clients who are much more transactional, and that's obviously absolutely fine.
Yeah. Looking ahead, what are your strategic objectives for 2025 and beyond? Obviously, growth, that's, I think, for almost any organization, a healthier thing than not growth. But beyond that, what are you looking for Cripps to become?
Well, we're 3 years into our 5-year strategy, and a large part of that strategy anticipated growth. We are achieving that through the things that we have done, and we're quite comfortable with that trajectory. We remain open to other ways of growing. We don't need to do a merger, but for the right kind of partner, I think we would be very open to that. In terms of our business priorities, it is to continue to drive sustainable organic growth and to bring new people in to help us achieve that. And there's a big bit in I think any professional services firm around productivity and efficiency. So how you go about achieving that, whether that's through the use of technology or whether it's more straightforward, if you like, improvements in process, that's a huge challenge for us. And increasingly clients want to know that we are taking advantage of the technology products that are in the market, which is moving so quickly at the moment. So that whole piece around how we can move forward and adapt our operating model and the way we deliver our services so that we are even more efficient and are fit for the future, which is one of the phrases we've been using internally. I think that's a huge challenge. It's quite exciting, but the AI piece it's getting clearer what it does mean right now for businesses like ours, but it's quite obvious that there's a long way to go down that road before the picture's really clear. So at the moment, we're making sure we don't put all our eggs in one basket. We've got a nice play area where we are actively encouraging our people to experiment with different products and build up a level of awareness and skill sets so that we can adapt more quickly when new products come into the market.
Yeah, you sort of touched on AI, and I figured we'd get into that at some point because it is such a big thing, and particularly kind of lots of speculation anyway that's going to make a big difference to professional services firms. One of the things I've noticed in some of that writing is that people making a distinction between using AI or other technologies for automation to take labor cost out of the picture. And the other is augmentation, to give people the ability to do things either they couldn't do before at all, or they couldn't do in a reasonable time frame and cost. And of course, those two will overlap a bit. I'm just curious, does that way of looking at it shape any of your thinking about it? And which way are you leaning, if at all?
I'm firmly of the view that at the moment there's an awful lot of products that are extremely useful for the non-legal side of what we do, by which I mean many lawyers in many law firms will complain that they are so bogged down with the admin or the processing of what they do that they don't have as much time to actually advise the clients as they did before. So if AI, which I think it can help reduce the time of the admin and the processing, by which I mean things like automated minute taking and Teams meetings like these, or indeed face-to-face meetings, or the AI host gives you a call and goes through a series of questions and then produces a almost perfect draft within 2 minutes of that conversation ending. Few of us have many phone calls these days. We communicate in a different way. Therefore, someone phoning me up, I'm happy to take a 1-minute phone call that produces a document that would have taken me half an hour or an hour to produce if I'd had to start from fresh. So those little things are quite useful, but that's the automated side of what you were talking about. The augmentation side is, I think, the slightly scary bit, because once we start being able to cut research down from 5 hours to 5 minutes, then where does that leave the juniors, and where does it leave them in 3 years' time when they haven't had the bedrock of research training that people like James and I had. So that's the bit where I don't know where it's going to end up. We're going to have a bit of a board session, aren't we, James, later this year, where we'll invite a couple of outside speakers and our internal team will run it just to really make sure we're scanning the horizon properly. But as James said, we're doing a lot of playing in the sandbox, which I think is the best thing you can do at the moment. And then I'm sure that we'll pick one or two products later this year that help on the perhaps non-legal side of things first. James, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most obvious commitments we've made have been around with the big knowledge providers, so LexisNexis and Practical Law. So we were already using them as many, if not most, law firms do, and so as they roll out their AI products, it's a natural thing to continue to see what those deliver. So I think it's hugely powerful if you can much more quickly produce research, produce straightforward documents, reducing the time it takes to do it, and having a more consistent approach to how you do that, and having more time, or your lawyers having more time to do what I think clients really pay you for, which is to advise them and to work with them, I think is a huge opportunity. I don't regret any elements of my career, but if one consequence of this is that, I don't know, you don't have to spend a day in the library looking through books, trying to find answers to things, to produce notes that then get heavily marked up in red pen by a discerning partner, or you're processing huge volumes of information, whether that be in litigation disclosure, due diligence in transactions. I think that's a good thing. And I think in the end, the market will realize it's a good thing. And once these products really do work, the margin of error using technology, I think, will be considerably lower than humans. And those things are good. And I don't believe that the natural consequence of all of this is that we will become superfluous or surplus to any kind of requirements. At its core, I think people buy people, and I honestly don't think that will change. I think we will have to adapt hugely in the way in which we think about how to deliver a service. But that's a good thing.
It's a big trust point, isn't there? It's a bit like the driverless car. When are we going to trust the driverless car that drives better than humans? It'll be the same point as we trust the AI, legal Gen AI, to actually produce the perfect bit of advice. When do you actually get to the point where you trust that without actually checking it yourself and doing it yourself?
I think that's right. But part of my role is working with external providers, whether they're lawyers, accountants, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But when I think about who I want to use and we talk to them about whether we're going to work with them, the first thing on my mind is, what is your experience in our sector? How can you demonstrate to me that you can not only do the job, because some aspects of the job that you need to aren't that complicated, but what's your experience? What's your team done? What can you bring to me in terms of that? I've been there before, I've seen that before, I've done that, and this is what I think you could do, or why don't think about that, or say, I think you're wrong, James, because in my experience, that's just not the right way to look at it. And that's what people buy. They buy the experience. And I'm not sure, maybe one day AI will be able to take that away too, but I don't see that changing in the short to medium term.
AI's likely anyway pretty likely to be a big disruptor, but is there something we're missing, law firms might be missing, you might be worried about that isn't AI, or is that kind of right now that's the game?
What about the new contenders in the legal sector? Do they provoke a challenge? We've got a lot of private equity interest in funding aggregator models within the legal sector. Is it eating a little bit of the lunch of mid-sized law firms like ours? Not much. So at the moment, we're feeling really as though we've still got a competitive edge, but that's a threat, isn't it?
And it's funny, isn't it? Because for years, people have been talking about the legal market deregulating, external funding, external competition. But I do think we're at a tipping point. Anecdotally, you can see there's a number of transactions with private equity, as Mike said. And I mean, the legal market is always rife with rumours, but there will be consolidation in our market. And it will be very interesting to see what that means for lawyers and for clients. And again, I think technology will be a big part of that. But I think disruption in a very traditional market where there are a huge number of different law firms can only be a good thing. And I think the parallel to look at is the accountancy sector, which has seen significant change over the last 3, 4, 5 years with external investment and with rapid consolidation. In overall terms, that is going to be possibly more disruptive for our profession in the short term than AI. Even if one of the drivers behind that consolidation and change is to be able to invest more in technology and be more efficient and drive better processes.
But what I hear you saying is that consolidation may come first as something that actually impacts your business, and the AI impact, both for the consolidated businesses and for you, may come a bit later.
I suppose with greater scale, it's easier to invest. With external investments, it's easier to invest in your businesses. So the reality is, I suspect even the very big global law firms, there are limits to what they can do from within their own profit pool to really invest in technology in the way that the big technology companies can and do. The resources available to a LexisNexis are infinitely greater than any single law firm. So that interplay in those areas and the need to be bigger and to be able to invest more, I think is going to be key. And there hasn't been much change in our profession for a very long time, and real change is long overdue.
I usually ask my guests if they have any advice for other leaders about strategy and purpose. And of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'd also be interested in any advice you might give to someone starting out in their career. For them, how should they be thinking about the choices they're making and the purpose and strategy of whatever firm they might be with, or even career options they're thinking about?
Oh, that's a good question. One of the most enjoyable things I've done over the last 2 years is being more active around mentoring and with young people. And I'm old now, so I don't understand what it's like to be young. But I think that the choice is greater now for young people in the sense that it is much easier to look at whether it's different law firms that you might want to join or even different industries. But if you look hard enough, you can find businesses whose purpose and values and vision will resonate with you. So I think that's a really important part for young people is think about what kind of a business you want to be working with and associated with. And if you can align your values with theirs, then you've got a much clearer starting point. Words I often use are resilience. Extraordinary things have happened in this world over the last 6, 7 years, but resilience is a big thing, particularly with, I think, younger people. Being curious, be interested, and this is really old-fashioned of me to say it, but always make sure, that you're giving more than you take. I think it's that balance in an employment relationship is that if you are giving more, then your ability to be successful and build your career, be recognized, increases. Just doing enough probably isn't good enough, and I don't think it ever was good enough. But if you want to build your career, you have to work hard at it.
Curiosity from the outset is something that will set you in really good stead. So I sat down with a young man who came to see us last week and is setting out in his career and interested in joining us and wanted a little bit more about what he might bring to the table. And I did say, whoever you join on day one, as long as you are showing curiosity beyond the law, we expect you to be curious and interested in the law, but curiosity beyond the law in all the businesses of your clients and also the lives of your colleagues, then I think that is a really important characteristic to build on. And I don't think it is old-fashioned at all, James. I think being generous is an entirely and thoroughly modern value that we want to try and promote more and more. And so, yeah, curiosity and generosity will get you a long, long way. We'll build success out of that.
Having people together, working together, I think enriches the work experience.
Thank you for that. Really interesting, particularly to have sort of the dual senior partner, managing partner view of things. So I really appreciate both of you taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Not at all. Maybe look forward to speaking to you in a year. Who knows?
That'd be great. That'd be brilliant.
Thanks, Belden.
All righty.
Thank you, Belden.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.